The word never carries a lot of weight. Never forget, never settle, never surrender. And now Dodge is proud to announce Never Lift, the full throttle rally cry of stepping on the gas and never letting up. With the 475 horsepower Durango SRT 392 and the muscle car dynamic duo Dodge Charger and Challenger, and the introduction of Dodge Power Brokers, your official dealer for legendary direct connection performance parts. For more on the Never Lift mindset, go to Dodge.com. Dodge is a registered trademark of FCA US LLC.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Direct-to-Video Connoisseur podcast. Matt here. I'm solo again this week after a really great show that we had 2 weeks ago with Ty and Brett from the Comeuppance Review site. Great having them on, great conversation that we had about Red Brown and all of that. So yeah, hopefully we'll get more guests on in the future. Probably at this point it might be like an every other episode thing. So maybe earlier in the month I'll get a guest, and then later in the month I'll just go by myself. So we'll see how it goes. Of course, with the holidays coming, it's always hard to get guests just because everybody's busy. Everybody's trying to kind of deal with all their other stuff they got to deal with. And then when the new year comes, everybody's ready to start podcasting again. So we'll see what happens. We'll see how that goes. So for this episode where I'm by myself, I wanted to look at 3 movies that I had watched recently. So 2 of them were ones I reviewed. Blackwater with Dolph Lundgren and Jean-Claude Van Damme is one. China Salesman, which has Mike Tyson and Steven Seagal in it, is the other. And then the third one I'll look at is Deadpool Part 2. So we'll see. That's not what I'm reviewing, obviously, because it was in the mainstream theater. And generally, unless it's a special occasion, I don't do mainstream ones unless they really bombed in the theater, which obviously Deadpool 2 didn't bomb in the theater. So I just wanted to get into it, discuss it a little more, especially since we've been talking about Marvel movies recently. The Fox ones are a little bit different than the Disney Marvel Cinematic Universe ones. So I thought I'd talk about that a little bit as well. All right, so we'll start off here and we will talk about Blackwater. So Blackwater stars Jean-Claude Van Damme and Dolph Lundgren. And the interesting thing with the 2 of them is that I think had this movie been made even 10 years ago, especially when I first started the blog in 2007, the idea of a Dolph Van Damme movie, it would have been the biggest thing, right? We would have been all over that. And granted, I've been out of this for about 4 years now, so it's not like I was keeping track of all of it so much. But by the same token, the fact that this movie kind of slid under the radar for me, I only found it because I was looking up other Dolph movies on Prime, and it just popped up, and I was like, oh, geez, I need to review this, right? I need to do it. So it's interesting where we're at. And I think part of the reason why the novelty isn't there so much, I mean, Van Damme's not doing as many direct-to-video movies. He never really did a lot anyway. He kind of would do like one a year or something like that. But Dolph has been doing a lot lately. So the fact that, I think it makes it a little bit less of a novelty. Plus, they came back together to do the Universal Soldier film again. So it's not like they haven't been working together. So that might have been part of it as well. But I was surprised that this wasn't the kind of the big thing. And maybe part of that was me being out of the game for so long. But I think, 10 years ago, this would have been huge. So quick synopsis on the movie. It's more of a Van Damme picture than a Dolph picture. Van Damme plays a deep cover CIA operative who is trying to flush out somebody who is selling state secrets to bad actors. And he gets captured by Patrick Kilpatrick. He's brought on board what they call the Blackwater, ops site. It's essentially a submarine that's, I guess, a floating version of Guantanamo Bay, or the Guantanamo Bay site where they were keeping terrorists after 9/11. So he's there. The idea is they're going to interrogate him, find out where he put this information. Because I think Kilpatrick's idea is he thinks that that Van Damme was the guy who had was trying to sell the state secrets. Anyway, his mentor is on the submarine as well. It turns out the mentor is the one who was trying to sell the state secrets, and he wanted to find out where Van Damme had the information so he could sell it, right? Because that was the whole idea. He still wanted to sell it. Van Damme escapes the interrogation room, and then he and this plucky upstart of a new recruit are on the ship, and they're trying to get control of the submarine before his Dolph's mentor and the other baddies get control of it instead. That way, he can get the word out about what happened. Dolph Lundgren plays a fellow inmate on board. We don't really know about his past till the end. We find out, I guess, that he was a Secret Service agent for Germany. So chalk that up. I mean, I guess he played Germans before, right? He was an East German in Pentathlon, so it's not like the first time he's played a German, but he kind of runs the gamut, right, between Eastern European and Scandinavian characters, and European characters. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Never played a French character, right, which would be interesting because we think about it. Patrick Stewart has played a French character, so Patrick Stewart can be a French character. I feel like we can have Dolph be a French character at some point. But anyway, so yeah, so as Van Damme's trying to get through the sub and try to take control of it and get the word out about the bad guys, he does let Dolph free, and he and Dolph, along with this plucky upstart, go and sort of win the day. Now, for me, it wasn't the best, and of course, it was a little disappointing that it wasn't the best. Part of it was that it wasn't really a Dolph Van Damme team up. Dolph was more like a Chekhov's gun type person, right? Where you see him in the beginning, and it's like, okay, they're going to use him at some point. It's just how that's going to happen and how far into the movie are we going to have to wait for it. I think it was like the last half hour or so that he came in. So that part of it didn't work. But the other thing I realized, I think it's just the construct of a submarine movie. Submarine movies just don't seem to work, right? And I think that is a problem. They're too confined to space. It's not like if you're in a jungle or a factory or something like that where you can go between confined and open spaces and mix it up a little bit better. It was constantly confined space. Also, they were using rubber bullets. The characters were using rubber bullets, so it meant people weren't being killed off. So it's like you take somebody out, but then they'd come back later, or it seemed like you wouldn't know when people were dying or not. So that made it a little bit iffy as well. I think that the whole thing, it could have been done better, maybe if it was outside. The other thing too is, I believe it was described as Die Hard on a submarine, and it really wasn't that. Maybe had it been Die Hard on a submarine, it might have worked better. It didn't have enough full on action for it to really do that. That being said, there were some nice parts to it. I really liked seeing Van Damme have a fight scene with his son. I thought that was really cool to watch in the movie. And again, I don't think I could ever do that with my dad, have a fake fight scene. So I don't know what that's like, but it is interesting to think. We grew up with Van Damme, and his son was born in the late 80s, I believe, like 86, 87. So his son's in his 30s now. His son is a little bit older than his dad was when Jean-Claude Van Damme first started in the business making films. So it is really cool to see that now that he's at that point, and he's made a few movies. They've made a few movies together, so that was something that was really cool to see, and I really like that. Dolph's character was cool. I liked Dolph's character in the film. It just again, we didn't get enough of him, and so that was a little bit too bad. And I don't know the reason for that, if that was part of the script to not have enough of him, or maybe this was how much we've got of Dolph before he goes on to do his next movie. So that could have been it too. Overall, I think this one, it was a little bit of a disappointment, and it would have been nice. It seemed like this was the movie that a movie that it just again, however many years ago would have been amazing, and it just didn't do that for me, and it was a little bit of a disappointment to see that. It's going to be interesting to see as these two actors, Dolph and Van Damme, go on. Van Damme's going to be 60 this year. Dolph's already, I think he's just turned 62. So, they're getting up there, and these movies do take a bit of a toll. Like there's a lot involved in making them. We are seeing like Stallone and Schwarzenegger making movies into their 70s. I believe Bronson's last Death Wish picture, he was in his 70s. I can't remember. Or maybe it was another movie he did in his 70s. But so it's not like it's not unheard of to work that far into it. But if the DTVC makes it another 10 years, it's going to be interesting to see where these guys are at that time. And it's kind of a sad thing to think about, that we're you know talking about Van Damme starting 30 years ago and remembering when those pictures were big at that time and how cool action was at that time. And now it's something a little bit different, where we're now, kind of seeing them doing direct to video stuff and wondering, where it's going to go from here. It'd be really cool to see how that goes. Yeah, so I think, and I'm hoping that we're going to get one more really good one with these two. Maybe if they make another movie together, that we get something big that's really exciting. Because again, this one was a little bit lackluster, and I don't know. I guess thinking about what could have done better, I think more of a team up would have worked. And I don't know if that's a problem with a lot of these actors making a lot of movies. Van Damme's not making a lot, but Dolph is, Seagal is. They're making a lot of pictures right now. I wonder if they can only, if they're making so many, they can only do so many scenes in the different movies that they're in, and that's part of it too. So we'll see. Interesting thing about Dolph is that he has 49. This was the 49th movie of his we've reviewed, so he's by far the most. He has 49. I believe Gary Daniels has 43, and then Albert Pyun has 41. So the next movie we do for Dolph is going to be his 50th. So I'm going to have to think of something special to do for that. I'll probably just review any of the movies that are out there. But, if you can think of one of his newer DTV ones that I haven't done yet that you think I should cover for his 50th, absolutely let me know, because it's a big deal, right? He'll be the first to 50. I believe he was the first to 40. So, he's kind of the driving force of the DTVC, right? He's what we call the Babe Ruth of direct-to-video action. So it'll be cool to see what happens with him going forward. All right, so now we'll move on to China Salesman. So China Salesman, it stars Seagal and Mike Tyson. And if you ever see the trailer for this, it's just this really big, high-octane action scene between the two of them, and you think this is going to be sick. But it's on Netflix, and I noticed that when I had my cursor over the movie in Netflix, I noticed that it was showing me this scene of Dong Shui Li, who's kind of the main star, him and another woman running around trying to rescue a baby from some tribes people in Africa. I thought that was interesting. I'm thinking, okay, this is a Seagal Tyson movie, but this is the scene I'm seeing in Netflix. Maybe this isn't quite the movie that the trailer depicted it to be. And sure enough, that was the case. They have that really great scene. There are other scenes that happen. Tyson is in the movie a little bit more than Seagal, but this isn't really their movie. This is supposed to be Dong Shui Li's movie, and it's kind of a pro-China celebration kind of movie where the character is overcoming odds of people don't respect him as a Chinese person versus the Europeans that are trying to. In the movie, their telecom companies are bidding for the rights to have the cell phone towers in a North African country that's developing, and so there's an idea that that the Chinese company isn't as well advanced, and it's not going to win the bidding versus the European one, and they kind of show themselves that they're good enough for that on the backs of Dong Shui Li. But then also there's an idea that there's sort of a nefarious plot going on with the Europeans, that they're there to exploit these African nations like they have in the past, and they're just sort of furthering that imperialist agenda that they've had for 400 or 500 years there in Africa. So that's what the movie's more about, and we just happen to have Seagal in it. I mean, Tyson is in it a little bit more because he's playing the head of, or he's playing a representative of a displaced tribe of people in Africa. We're looking for homeland again, and he's leading a charge to start a civil war in the country there. So, it's an interesting thing with movies like this. They put all their money into getting Seagal and Tyson in the film, and they wanted to make sure they got their money's worth. So they made sure they were prominent in the trailer, prominent on the cover. And it's hard. I don't know if you call it a bait and switch or if it's just a way to get your money back from having them in the film. But either way, it wasn't an accurate understanding of what the film was about. And, so anybody going into it is going to see that. The runtime is long, and the movie has a natural ending at about like the hour and 20-minute mark, and then it just tacks on another like 40 minutes or so that it didn't need, which was really weird. There were a lot of weird things in this movie, and that was one of them. Um, I I don't, again, I don't know what the driving forces were. I don't know if there was, sort of Chinese government forces behind getting the movie out there, perhaps, and wanting to have certain things told in the movie or certain things shown in the movie, which maybe that would have affected why they would have done that extra running time, or maybe they just, just kind of got carried away or something like that. But it made the movie a little bit more unbearable to have that extra time that just felt like it was spinning its wheels. So something that I don't think was necessary in there. One of the things I thought was interesting was what you had, Chinese patriotism in the film. You have the character of Dong Shui Li, waving the Chinese flag as they go past the checkpoint, and the people at the checkpoint let them through because they're not representing a European power, they're not representing one of the other warring African factions in the country. It reminded me a lot of the patriotic American films that we get, especially the lot that came out post 9/11, and then the Iraq War and those kinds of things, where you just had this huge spate of just these kind of rah patriotic type films. And it was nice to to see it in a different light, to see it with a Chinese production doing it that way. I think for Americans, you kind of either see those one way or the other, right? So you're that kind of rah, Toby Keith, we're going to put a boot in your ass kind of a patriotic person. And so in that case, you look at it and you say, okay, yeah, I love this kind of movie. Yeah, just give me all the red, white, and blue you can, and let's blow everything up. Or you're the kind of American who's like, hey, I love America, but man, this stuff's insufferable. I can't handle this. And so sometimes I think, when you see other movies do it, other countries do it in their movies, there's a part of you that goes, oh, that's interesting. And a part of you that's like, ugh, boy, or, I guess if you're one of those rah types, you're like, no, man, get out of here with that. I don't want to see that stuff. So I thought it was a really cool element to this film. I thought there was a lot of, kind of international relations stuff going on there between, as China is challenging the global economy. It just would have been nice if the movie was shorter. I think I could have managed it a little bit better. It made its point well enough in the first hour, 20 minutes, and it made it really well. I thought that it didn't need the extra 40. And it wasn't like they did a lot with Tyson or Seagal after that we really needed it. So, it would be interesting to see. Tyson's doing more movies now. I saw he did a couple of the Kickboxer sequels with Van Damme. Obviously, Seagal's doing a lot of stuff now. It'd be interesting to see what Tyson can do in the direct-to-video realm as an action hero, because again, he was one of the. I mean, I grew up watching him box, and he was maybe one of the fiercest, but also, I mean, just from a sheer athletic standpoint, I mean, he was one of the best that did it. And you just remember at the time he would just kind of come full speed on people and just go. But it wasn't just the insane punching power, but he was an immense athlete. And it'd be interesting to see how that, I mean, it looked like it carried over really well in the fight scene that he had with Seagal. And I think it would be nice to see it in a film, maybe see him. I don't know if you want to have him as the lead or somebody who's helping out the lead, or even as a baddie. I don't know what you do, but that kind of talent there, I think, really could carry over for an action film. And, for us as action fans, we don't need a big plot. We don't need a lot of storytelling. We just need some hardcore action. And I think Tyson is someone who could carry that for us. And yeah, I think it might be interesting going forward. Again, we were talking about how some of these other actors are getting up there in age. Not like Tyson would be the youngest either, but he's, same idea. He's younger than them. He's younger than Seagal. He's younger than Van Damme. He's younger than, so, I think, actually, I don't know if he is younger than Van Damme. That's a good point. He might be around the same age, but the point is that, as we're getting fresh faces, we're getting people like Adkins in, Michael Jai White starting to do more stuff. It would be interesting to see what we could do with Tyson, to see what kinds of movies he could make if he's got the right director and apparatus around him for a film, just to see that kind of talent. I'm always a sucker for that kind of, those raw athletes who can really bring them. That's why I always loved Dolph. Dolph was, he's always one of the best athletes in the movies that he was making. And I always loved to see him make, do fight scenes, bring it in an action movie because he had that natural talent. Van Damme's another natural athlete. And, obviously, I mean, Tyson might be, I don't know if he would be better than Dolph as a natural athlete, but he would be up there. And I just think to see that would be something really cool. Of course, we don't get that here, but I think going forward, that's something I would really love to see. What can you do with Tyson in these kinds of movies, and really see him bring it in something? Nothing wrong with an 80-minute actioner where he's doing more fighting and blowing things up than trying to do any kind of plot exposition, or having to really get out there and act too much if it's not something that's really natural for him. What's natural for him is being an athlete. He's just amazing. So yeah, I think that's something that we could see more of. I'd like to see action, direct-to-video action, get back to that a little bit more. Part of it is by having older actors do it. They don't have quite the athletic ability that they had before, because just natural to deteriorate over age. I mean, I'm just turning 40 now, and my back hurts sometimes just getting out of bed. So you can't expect them to be at that level that they were at originally. But we're seeing guys like Atkins come along who just can bring it, and I think we need more of that. We can't get into too much of this sort of Bourne Identity. Quick cuts. I know there was somebody who, I think it was the guy who wrote the Seagalology, who referred to it as avid fart editing, where you're just seeing different cuts going on, and you can take anybody like a Liam Neeson or a Matt Damon and make them into a fighter by just cutting the scenes quickly enough. We need big, long takes of just guys just really, well choreographed fights who are just bringing it. And that's what we were used to in the 90s. I mean, when you think of the PM Entertainment fight scenes, and you got guys like Gary Daniels who just brought it. Jeff Wincott's another one that comes to mind. Don the Dragon Wilson in the Corman produced films that he did. It was really good stuff, but it was also, longer choreographed things, not a lot of edits. Yes, it does take its toll on the actor. So, you don't want to see it all the time. But I think what I like about Scott Adkins is he wants to do that kind of action. And I'd like to see more of that. And I think someone like a Mike Tyson, who is a natural athlete, I think he can be trained to do that. I mean, he had a really great fight scene with Seagal in this movie. I mean, it was probably one of the best parts of the movie. I think he could do that kind of thing really well, and we could really see some really truly inspired stuff. With him working against an Atkins or Michael Jai White or whoever. Some really, really well choreographed thing just to see him flex his athletic muscles against some of those guys. So something to think about. But, unfortunately, we didn't get that here at China Salesman. And, it's advertised as such, but unfortunately, that's not the case. So, for me, I think between the runtime and the fact, if you're going to watch this movie, I think you should watch the beginning, watch that fight scene, because it is worth it if you're a connoisseur of that kind of thing. Not to, no pun intended with the direct-to-video connoisseur, but if you're a connoisseur of that kind of thing, I think you'd really like that. So, yeah, it's worth checking out. All right, so now we'll wrap up by talking about Deadpool 2. All right, so Deadpool 2, I saw relatively recently. I did see the first one, of course, and there is a podcast about the first one. It was way back when I thought I was going to get back into doing this again. I did a one-off on Deadpool, and then it just never happened. We were never able to make it happen further beyond that, unfortunately. So I did review that one. I think I gave a little bit of the history at that time of how I was with comics. So, I was a big fan of comics in the late 80s, early 90s, which was around the time that Deadpool had his first appearance. You had Deadpool coming on late in the New Mutants cycle before New Mutants turned over to X-Force. So I remember when they brought on Cable. He was just an amazing character. Then you bring on Deadpool, just another great one. And I actually read Rob Liefeld. He was talking about when he created those characters, he was trying to replicate the success that Marvel had with Wolverine and Spider-Man. So the idea was he wanted to create a new Wolverine and a new Spider-Man by creating Cable and Deadpool. And I think he did that. I mean, when I think of, sort of the big Marvel canon, right? When you've got, Spider-Man, you think of Wolverine, the Hulk, all of those big names, Daredevil, the Avengers, Captain America, all of them. Most of them came out before I was born in '79. Some came in the '80s, but most of the big names were, guys from the '60s and '70s. And so, to have Deadpool and Cable, especially Deadpool is so huge. Guys that were, had their first appearances when I was reading the comics. It was a really amazing thing. And to see Deadpool emerge into what he's become here, it's been really cool to see that. So that's something that I really liked about this. I think my problem with both of the movies is that for whatever reason, I don't get it why they have to really play with the canon so much. That first off, I guess Deadpool, I guess you couldn't make him a bad guy, which he did. He started out as a bad guy in the earlier episodes, even though in the early issues rather. But I mean, he was a sick bad guy. I mean, you loved watching. It's like if you saw Deadpool on the cover, you wanted to get that comic and just see what he was about. See what he was going to do in in that issue. And I think, I guess because he evolved into this anti-hero character, when they made the movies, they had to just make him straight anti-hero right away, or make him more hero than anti-hero. So they had to play with the canon. They couldn't make it be this thing where he's this guy that's, working for this underground boss Tolliver, and he's opposing Cable the whole time. You couldn't do it that way, which I guess I understand. But I kind of liked it that way. I thought it was really cool. I don't always like the way that they take these liberties with the canon. It's interesting too when you look at the Fox, which I guess technically now Disney's bought a lot of Fox. So I don't know if I guess they've bought the rights to these. I don't know, to the X-Men characters and the Fantastic Four ones. But it's always been interesting to see how those two universes have diverged, or the way that they've gone about it. And the idea with Deadpool, right, is he's supposed to be an R-rated version of the Marvel. But for me, I think the best R-rated Marvel is the series that they had on Netflix, in particular the Luke Cage one. I was a really big fan of the Luke Cage one. The Daredevil one was pretty good. The Jessica Jones one, I liked the first season. Second season didn't quite do it for me. The Punisher one I liked as well. I think I liked the first season better of that one as well than the second, but still really great stuff. The Iron Fist one also came in there. But you think of like the Punisher and the Luke Cage one, those ones were really R-rated, maybe even more, maybe even something bigger than that, and with the amount of blood and gore that's in them. And I almost think with the Deadpool movies that a series like that might be a better way to work with his character. It feels like these movies, like they kind of just, I don't know. There's something about movies, the way movies are made nowadays, where even something like Deadpool's, where it's supposed to be R-rated, it still just feels so overly focus grouped that you can't get into like what you want to do with it, or you just, I don't know. There's something bland about it, even as much fun as the Deadpool movies are. And this one did have a little bit. I mean, again, you're bringing on Cable. It's supposed to be great. Cable and Deadpool are fighting each other. And of course, the weird thing, right, is the flipped dynamic, right? When they first started off, it was Cable, it was the good guy fighting the bad guy, Deadpool. And now we're supposed to be rooting for Deadpool against Cable, the way they flipped it. I like the way they brought Domino's character in. She was really great. It's going to be interesting to see what they do going forward with some of the other ones like Shatterstar, if they bring them back. Because it's like they died, but then we think Deadpool went back in time and saved them. I don't know exactly how that worked. Again, it's all weird stuff that I think, a Deadpool series on a streaming service, which if it's going to be on Disney Plus, full disclosure, I'm not getting Disney Plus. I don't want to deal with that. I've already got Netflix, I've already got Hulu, and the way Disney is, since they've taken over Fox, the way they're vaulting movies, trying to hoard them, keep them out of indie theaters, that kind of thing, just to try to sell their Disney Plus. To me, it's kind of unseemly. I know Netflix does similar stuff, so I'm probably, I'm maybe picking my battles or something, but it's not something that I'm really going to get into. But I think something like that, like a Deadpool series, might work better, just because you can sort of go episodically, have him dealing with certain situations in a way that in a movie, I feel like, I guess with the movie, it just has to be so over the top and so big and explosion worthy, but also so focus grouped that it doesn't really do much beyond just being a bunch of explosions and being, over the top. That, I think a series can maybe get grittier. It can do things now that in the past maybe TV couldn't do. It can be more expansive in how it looks at Deadpool, looks at Cable, Domino. You can bring in more villains here and there, add things to it to really get, for us, that from someone like myself who grew up with these comics, really get to the geek part of us. And I think that's what I felt like. I watched the movie. I liked Josh Brolin as Cable. I liked the way the characters in the movie, but I left it thinking like, okay, that was it. That was the end of it. And now I've got to wait 2 more years, right, for another one. And I think that's kind of the thing. It's like they're all the same movie. Even this Deadpool one that's R-rated, it's still just another Marvel movie where it's this kind of like big action scene after big action scene, but they're all kind of the same big action scene where people are up on big heights, they're swinging around, car chases, that kind of stuff. And it's great in a PM entertainment film. I really enjoy it there. But with these big Marvel things, like they just all seem the same. I think even with Deadpool trying to do something different, it still ends up just eventually just being the same. And I think with the TV show aspect of it, you can get into something a little bit different. You can explore the character a little bit more. You don't have to feel like, okay, I've got 2 hours to just blow as much stuff up as I can and get from point A to point B and have as many plot twists as I can, so you don't know what's going to happen next, and do it all that way. With a TV series like, with the Luke Cage TV series, what's really great about that is that you can develop. They develop that character over a period of episodes. They got baddies that they develop at the same time. Yes, there's big action that happens, but it's also it is much grittier. It develops things in a nicer way, and it gets to the heart of a lot of issues that a movie couldn't do. I don't know what a Luke Cage movie would have looked like if it was just 2 hours versus a long season that I can binge like that. But I don't think it would have been as good. And I feel like something like Deadpool really lends itself to something great like that. And the difference I think between the Netflix ones versus a regular TV show is that they aren't as episodic. They're more like, it's like almost like a big movie played over 13 parts. And I think the Deadpool one might be even cooler to do more episodically, where it's just like, oh, this baddie just showed up and now he's got to deal with it, and that kind of thing. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with all of these products as now that Disney's taken them all over, to see if we start to get the crossovers, Spider-Man, Deadpool crossover, that kind of thing. I worry, like, okay, yeah, you do a Spider-Man, Deadpool crossover movie, which sounds like real fantastic to me. But then, what happens? Is it just going to be? It's just going to be like a series of, explosions and plot twists that we all see coming for 2.5 hours or 2 hours or however long it is, and it's not really going to do much for us. Whereas, like a series, a one-off, 13 episode series of Spider-Man and Deadpool would be pretty fantastic, right? It would be amazing. Which I guess the other thing too I'm realizing is that Marvel doesn't have that Disney doesn't have the rights to Spider-Man, right? They just borrow him for these cinematic universe things, but overall Sony has the rights to that. That whole thing is just, it's so fugazi. And I know recently that I guess Marvel originally was doing it all piecemeal, and now now that Disney has control, they're trying to get control of them all. But I was thinking about with the Infinity War, how much I loved that when that came out. I think I was like in seventh grade when that series came out in comics, that big crossover. And I remember Silver Surfer played such a huge part in that, and that series. And the Fantastic Four were big in that. Galactus, some of those other big characters. Well, I guess Fox owned the rights to those, so then they can't be in the Infinity War. So it kind of makes it a little bit. I don't know. It's not as big as it is for me as a comic book fan. And I know a lot of people just go and watch those Marvel movies and they like to just, switch off and just let it all happen, which I get, But I think for me as a pure, as a comic book fan, someone who grew up reading them, I want to see Silver Surfer fighting against Thanos with everybody else. He's like one of my favorite characters. And, the fact that he's been shelved like that because he's over in Fox, it just, I don't know, it kind of makes it not as cool. And so it's going to be interesting to see what happens if you start to move these. If Disney gets control over all the Fox ones, then I guess they've got to figure out what to do with the Sony ones, which I guess Sony is trying to develop their own products like the Venom movies and things like that. So maybe we won't get all of those. I don't know. I don't know how that's going to work. It's kind of a fugazi aspect of it that as fans of comic book movies, we don't get everything all at once. I know those Avengers movies, those things do huge in the theater. Like every time they put one out, it just is a blockbuster. So I know there's everybody loves them and they don't necessarily need it all that way. But I think the Deadpool movie reminded me that as much as, it's really cool to see Deadpool get to this point and see him where he's at as this, somebody who's there on the level of like a Spider-Man or a Wolverine. To see him at that level, I think is really cool. But at the same time, I'm reminded of the fact that, the movie's just not, in the early 90s, of the idea of a Deadpool movie, I would have been so excited. And if it had been just one of those, Albert Pyun type flicks that, everybody, scoffs at now, I still would have thought it was awesome, right? It still would have been cool for me. I think that's one of the frustrating parts now is that, all these movies are getting made and they're just these overly focus grouped, like bland kind of productions that you're like, oh, why aren't they doing this? Or, oh, I wish they would have done that. And I know a lot of people making these movies are people my age. So they grew up with the, comic books the same way I did. I think that's why they made such a big push to do the Infinity Wars. They grew up with it the way I did, and they really like it. Um, and so, I know that they're trying to do justice to it, and they're trying to make it work. I think the problem is that then it's like, okay, now marketing gets involved, everybody else gets involved, and then suddenly you start, sort of, you know, smoothing off the edges a bit, and it becomes something different that you're just like, oh, okay, it's just another one of these movies. And I think the most recent one was like 3 hours long, which, I mean, it's like, I think Ran was 3 hours long, right? The Kurosawa adaptation of King Lear. Like, yes, that should be a 3 hour movie. I don't need a comic book movie to be 3 hours long. I need it to be, 2 hours at the most of just fantastic explosions, as many characters as I can see, all being like that cool character that I remember from the movie, and interacting with each other, and so I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, one thing we know about Disney is Disney does not really take chances, right? They want to make it something that is going to appeal to as many people as possible and save their bottom line as much as possible. So, that's one thing to worry about too with Deadpool, is that maybe they get Deadpool and they soften off his edges a bit and make him a nicer product. I don't know. Um, so we'll see what happens when Deadpool 3 finally comes out. I don't know when it's slated to come out, but it's going to be interesting to see what they do too going forward. I mean, they are already kind of, played the cable card, so to speak. So he's in there now. That was kind of my big anticipation. I mean, the first one, that was one of the problems with the first one, is it didn't really have anybody in it. I mean, it had Colossus of all people. So it wasn't really doing much for me. The new one, it was like, okay, Cable's going to be in this one. That's exciting. And it was cool at points. It was cool seeing Cable on screen like that. But it did feel like it was like, what's so special about it being Cable and Deadpool beyond the fact that the names are there and it looks like them? There was nothing beyond that was like, oh yeah, this is these guys here that I remember from those comics when they used to kick ass together so much. So it's going to be interesting to see if they do. I mean, that would be a great series, right? That would be. I remember they had that comic that in the early 2000s, the Deadpool Cable comic. I mean, that would be a great series of the two of them, getting after it. I guess you couldn't get Berlin and Ryan Reynolds to play those parts, so then maybe I guess you have to find. I don't know. But I guess from Disney's standpoint, or Fox or whoever else making the movie, right, they make more money. You can make like $1 billion with the movie, whereas with the TV show, you can only make so much by having it stream or something like that. So it's maybe me as a comic book purist wanting something that's unrealistic. But yeah, I think, when I think about me as a comic book fan in the early 90s, and, the movies we had then, we had the Albert Pyun Captain America, Punisher kind of came and didn't really make it as we would have liked. You grew up with Hulk reruns, Hulk TV movies in the late 80s. Hulk might have been maybe one of the biggest ones to be successful. I remember there's the old Spider-Man 70s TV show. And then, right, you have Tim Burton making the Batman movies, and suddenly Batman was huge, and Batman was everywhere. You think of the Donner Superman movies; those were pretty spectacular. But for Marvel movies, there weren't a lot of successes out there. But I do remember, that there's the cartoons that came out. There's the X-Men cartoons that were big on Saturday mornings. That I think maybe kind of got the ball rolling. That okay, there's something here for this if we want to make big budget pictures. I'm trying to remember what the first one was, if it was the Fantastic Four, if it was X-Men. But of course, it was Fox that was making them. And I think when I saw the first X-Men one, I thought, wow, this is great. Like, this is something that I, this is the movie. This is supposed to be what it looks like. But then there were elements of it, like Storm, she sees somebody turn to water and she runs out of the room screaming, which I remember Storm as being like this like stoic leader. So that was not really something that worked there. The other thing too, of course, with Storm was that, well, you've got to have Cyclops as the leader, even though Storm was also the leader. And so it's like, you can't not have Storm in the movie, but yet she can't really be the leader because you have to have Cyclops as the leader. So you had things like that made it a little bit, it didn't work like you wanted to. But it was big because, I'm at the theater and I'm watching Marvel characters on the screen and it's working, right? They're doing it well. And I think, it just kind of rolled from there. I mean, then you had the Iron Man, that's when they started, linking them together, right? So at that point, they were all just one-off. It was X-Men here, Spider-Man there, Fantastic Four, they were all by themselves. And then you get to Iron Man, the new Hulk one, Thor, they start linking them together to build this big Marvel Cinematic Universe, which was, what we thought. When we remember the comics, everybody could cross over into each other's uh, books, and that was, what we were hoping for. I think for me the problem was is that I'm watching it, I'm like, this is just really like heavily focused group. Like these are like the same like blockbusters that I watched in the 90s, where it was like I knew everything that was going to happen before it happened in the movie. I think that's where I started to get disillusioned with it. That, you watch like a Thor. I think I watched the Thor Ragnarok one because that one looks so offbeat in the pictures and then in the commercials. And then I watch it and I'm like, this isn't offbeat at all. This is like every other Thor movie. It's just painted as being offbeat, but it really wasn't offbeat. And I think that's where it's like it's turned for me, where you know X-Men comes out, and I think in the early 2000s, and I think, wow, this is great. This is what what comic book movies really could be. And then I guess when the money starts to pour in, it's like, well, we got to make sure we don't take chances, and we just kind of make this as bland as possible so it appeals to as many people as possible. And then for me, as the person who grew up, I mean, those comics when I grew up with, I mean, they took chances. They did things because they could. And of course, the other thing too with those comics is, if you do a one-off that doesn't really work, it's not a big deal, right? If you're writing a comic book, and they would even have throwaway episodes, like Spider-Man's getting ready to do a big crossover with their 4 books and do this big story arc. Well, we got an episode we have an issue we need to burn, so we're just going to bring in some baddie like Hobgoblin or Vermin or somebody like that in a one-off episode, a one-off issue, and then boom, we're getting into this big, huge, like Carnage, Venom story arc that's going to go over all of the books for the summer. You could do that. You could afford to, because it's just $1 issue. I think there was $1 back then, and then I think it went up to $1.25 when I was collecting. Whereas with a movie, you can't afford to burn one, right? The movie has to be big. Everything has got to be big in it. It's all got to, be amazing. So you can't take chances. You can't do something that's going to flop. It has to always work, or it's not going to be worth the money that they're putting into it. I think of like TV shows. You think of Breaking Bad, where they did the episode where they're just chasing a fly around for the whole episode. You can't do that with movies. You can't have a movie that's chasing the fly around for the whole episode, but you can do it with a TV show if you need to kill an episode or you need to burn one. And I think that's because of that, because there's that need to make sure that everything is just right, so it makes the most money possible. It ends up becoming bland. I mean, sure, it's fun. It's a fun, exciting. It can be an exciting. I don't know if anything's exciting for 3 hours. I think I saw Lawrence of Arabia in the theater recently, and that was a bit much for me, even at 3 hours. But I think I don't know. I don't know if it'll ever change. I mean, I think the only way that we can really get back to a point where these comic book movies are starting to take chances again is, one, I think you get those series like the Luke Cage series, where you don't need to make billions of dollars, so you can afford to make chances. You can afford to to appeal to a smaller audience and make something that not everybody gets, but enough of us really love. With the TV series, you can do that, and it'll be interesting to see if more come along like that. But it might also be a situation where we need, it's going to take an upstart company to get in there. We've got DC and Marvel that are just doing a lot of it. And growing up, it was always those two, right? But then every once in a while, you get something like Dark Horse or Valiant that would come along, and that might be what it takes. Is that it takes like an upstart third publishing company to come in with their movies and do movies and TV shows that are really changing the game, and then suddenly people start to gravitate away from that. Especially true comic book fans, if they start to gravitate away from it, sure, you're going to get the big top. You're going to get the people that are just go to the movie theater on a Friday night and just want to spend their money, and sure, they'll see the Marvel one just as much as anything else. But it might be enough to format get the change where these movies are exciting again, or there's I don't know if exciting is the right word. I think exciting is the right word, because it's like if I watch one of these Marvel movies, it's like action happens, but it's like a predictable action. Like even the plot twists, I know, okay, a plot twist is going to come, and they can do whatever they want with the plot twist. It might be hard for me to see it coming, because if they make it too out of the box, I won't see it. But I know the plot twist is coming, so it's like, okay, at this point in the film, here comes the plot twist. Okay, here comes the action scene. Okay, here comes the scene where the main characters are being defeated. Okay, here's where looks like all hope is lost. Oh, now all hope is lost, but now they're going to recover and save the day. when you watch a Luke Cage episode, when you watch that series, it doesn't work that way. It's not a series of situations like that. It's more, there's more of a detective element where there's mysteries and things like that that are solved, but also the way that the characters interact. Things come out of nowhere. Things happen that you don't see in these comic book movies. There was one in the second season of Luke Cage where the guy that he was fighting against decapitated a whole bunch of people and just had their heads on spikes. And the thing was, like, these were characters that you thought maybe were going to do more in the series. And you wouldn't see that in a Marvel movie, like in a big movie. First off, you wouldn't see people getting decapitated, right? That's not something that happened. That's not big tent, right? That's Disney would come in and be like, no, you're not doing decapitations. But also, it was such a curveball because it didn't follow your traditional story arc of, like I was describing there, right? Characters go, they fight, lose the fight, almost, all hope is lost. Now they recover, save the day, win, everybody's happy. It was so completely out there. But it worked in the construct of the show, and you're like, yeah, this is gritty stuff, but it's not just gritty for the sake of gritty. It's like where it makes like a great point for a plot point. Like, yes, this is what this character would do if he's not overly focus grouped. He's gonna take out his bad guys like this, and it's not like they're keeping characters around for the sake of keeping them around because, if this is the main character, you don't just kill off main character. No, they're killing them off because that's what this other character would do if he's involved. And I think that's where I guess you have to go with the Marvel movie. Is you've got to, kill people off in ways that we don't expect, or make surprises, or change the storytelling so it's not that traditional focus group thing that we're seeing a lot of with these Marvel pictures. I don't know if you get there. I mean, if something's making $1 billion or $4 billion or whatever it is they're making, usually you don't change that, right? Disney's doing okay, though I know they had some problem with the Star Wars movie that they made, the Han Solo prequel or whatever, or origin story. So it's not like they're all working. And maybe that's the other thing too, is maybe we need to say, like, okay, yeah, I want to go see this Marvel movie because it's a comic book movie, and I feel like I just got to watch it because this is the Infinity War, and I grew up reading the Infinity War. I read like all the different books that were covering it because it was such a huge crossover. But maybe if you're like, you know what, no, I'm not going to bother with this. I've seen this too many times. It's the same movie. They're just going to do the same thing again. Then maybe then Disney starts to take note and say, okay, yeah, we got to do something different here. Like they're doing with the series that were on Netflix. I think they're probably going to move those to Disney Plus, which I don't know what that means for me. If I'm going to keep wanting to follow Luke Cage, if it moves to Disney Plus, if I want to keep following The Punisher, if it moves to Disney Plus, I don't know if I can even afford to just pay for another streaming service. So that's another issue. But it's interesting. It'd be interesting to see if Marvel, if Disney with the Marvel movies, they start to get away from the big tent productions. If it starts to not be as profitable, and I don't see when that happens. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure the next Marvel movie is going to be another big blockbuster, and we'll see what happens as we get into the summer or whatever. But for me, for what I find entertaining, for what I'm looking for, I'm not as big a fan of the Big Ten. Yeah, there are some Big Ten productions that I like. I love the Fast and the Furious ones. I love to turn my brain off and just watch cars sailing through the air and all of that stuff. And granted, it's the same kind of thing as you're seeing in the Marvel movie. I don't know what makes it better for me. With the Fast and the Furious, I guess because I'm a huge Vin Diesel fan. I don't know. Maybe that's what it is that does it. But and The Rock, I love The Rock too. But I think maybe the other thing too is I don't have a personal stake in the Fast and the Furious. I didn't grow up reading any Fast and the Furious comics. They didn't exist. It wasn't how it worked. I did think the first one was a ripoff of Point Break, and so I was a little bit dubious of the series going forward. But then they put out number 4, and suddenly everything changed. It was like, okay, this is just big action where I'm just going to turn my brain off and just let this happen. And it's just been fun for me like that. Maybe that's the problem, is that like I feel a certain ownership with some of these Marvel characters, even though they're not mine and I've just been reading them. But yeah, when you see them kind of turned into, Toy Story or whatever, Jurassic Park or whatever that they've been turned into, you feel like, oh, this isn't the character that I grew up with. This isn't who I remember them being. And I think that does sometimes come up, that you start to, I don't know how you say it, you what I wished for when I wished for these Marvel movies to be big and to see them on the screen, to see Spider-Man, like I saw him with the Sam Raimi films and the newer ones. This is what I wanted, but now it's like, okay, maybe it's not what I wanted. Maybe I got what I asked for, and maybe I want to just go back to the old, like, direct-to-video versions, which of course will never happen again now that Disney owns them. They're not going to let direct-to-video versions come out. But, part of me kind of wants to go back to that, which, sounds ridiculous, but, we'll see. All right, so that is the episode here. So like I said, we're doing another one in 2 weeks. Hopefully we will, we'll see about getting a guest on for that episode. I'm trying a new podcasting interface called Zencaster. The thing with Zencaster is that you and another person will record, and then you pay money to have the 2 tracks put together. So for right now, for it's just being me by myself, I'm not going to have to pay to have the track put together. But the one thing is, because I don't have the pro version, I can't use any sound. I can't do a soundboard or anything like that. So we're going to see, how this one goes. When I did the episode with Ty and Brett, I did Skype. I just recorded us on Skype and then converted the file into an MP3 and then did my own edits after. That seemed to be a lot. To do my own edits seemed to be a lot. So I'm trying to find ways to save on time, but also get as good of a product out there for everybody, because I know what it's like listening to podcasts. I love to listen to podcasts myself, and I want something to be high quality that people can listen to when they're, doing the dishes, riding in their car and traffic, making dinner, whatever. They can have me on in the background, at the gym, whatever you're doing. Have me on in the background, just kind of listen to what you're talking, or, my guests on. That's what I'm hoping for. So, I'm just kind of trying to find, see what I can do between, the budget that I have and but also trying to get something out there that's a better quality so that everybody can, enjoy it like that. It's probably not going to be a full professional quality because I don't have that kind of equipment, but, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. All right, so just to wrap up, again, you can find us on Facebook, Direct to Video Connoisseur, Twitter at DTV Connoisseur. Again, the blog is dtvconnoisseur.blogspot.com. In addition to that, I'm on Letterboxd now. DTV Connoisseur on Letterboxd. You can go there, check us out. A couple pages that I have one set of lists that shows movies that are in the can that I'm going to be reviewing soon. Another one that's a watch list that talks about movies that I'm going to be, considering for future reviews. So if you want to get on those, you can take a look and let me know about some that maybe aren't on there, or ones that are on the list that that you've looked at before and said, hey, I really like to hear what you have to think about this, or that one's a horrible one. Stay away from that, and we can see from there. Also still on Tumblr and Instagram. So, check us out on social media, drop me a line, let me know, what you'd like me to talk about, what movies you'd like me to do, things like that. And we'll go from there. All right. Thanks everybody for listening, and happy holidays. I know it's Thanksgiving week, so hope everybody has a happy holiday.
Ram Power Days is going on now with our most powerful lineup of trucks ever. Hurry in and don't just feel the power, own it. Right now, get 2.9% financing for 72 months on the 2022 Ram 1500 Bighorn Crew Cab. Don't miss this great offer. 2.9% APR financing for 72 months equals $1,515 per month per 1,000 financed for well-qualified buyers through Chrysler Capital regardless of down payment. Not all buyers will qualify. See dealer for details. Offer ends 10/31/2022.